It is primary day on Tuesday, and the race for the 5th Congressional District is likely to be one of the most closely watched. Ilhan Omar facing another challenge from former Minneapolis City Council member Don Samuels.
A household asset skyrocketed by 3,500% in just 12 months, reaching the $30 million mark. Is this a sign of financial acumen or the trace of a shocking major fraud case? Amid billions of dollars in pandemic relief vanishing, powerful agencies like the FBI and DHS have launched Operation Metro Surge to uncover a sophisticated underground network. This is not merely accounting discrepancies, it is an investigation into a profiteering system deliberately designed within the heart of welfare programs. What truth lies hidden behind the shell companies and frozen accounts? The answer is coming right up. The race between Ilhan Omar and Don Samuels has escalated dramatically this week, with allegations of fraud directed at a business partially owned by the Congresswoman's husband. Fierce controversies are surrounding Representative Ilhan Omar's political career as federal investigators begin focusing on financial activities around her husband following public records, showing a sudden 3,500% surge in the couple's reported household assets. At the same time, the FBI and other federal investigative teams have started examining a $9 billion pandemic-era fraud case in Minnesota. The net worth of this couple has skyrocketed by 3,500% in just 1 year, with current estimates placing the figure between $6 million and $30 million. Updated records indicate that within approximately 1 year, Representative Omar's declared asset range shifted from under $200,000 to between $6 million and $30 million. This surge has triggered intense federal scrutiny and urgent questions about the timing and the beneficiaries. The increase in assets occurred as prosecutors charged more than 90 defendants in a case that officials describe as the largest COVID-era welfare fraud in United States history. Right inside Representative Omar's congressional district, federal examiners from the FBI, Department of Homeland Security, and other criminal investigative agencies are scrutinizing transaction logs, corporate records, and prior dispute filings related to businesses connected to Tim Minot. Some of those businesses later amended their executive rosters. Officials stress that no formal charges have been filed against the couple yet, but the questions have shifted from who stole the money to who may have benefited as the system collapsed. Billions of dollars intended for struggling families vanished while the assets of certain individuals exploded overnight. Many people wonder whether this is mere coincidence or if someone profited when the system collapsed into crisis. More than 90 defendants have been charged in the Feeding Our Future network, but investigators have uncovered something far darker than ordinary bookkeeping fraud. This is not accounting abuse. It is exploitation deliberately engineered into the system itself. Programs claiming to provide food for children reported tens of thousands of meals, yet auditors discovered sites with no kitchens, no staff, and in some cases not even any buildings at all. While families waited in long lines for food aid during the pandemic, reimbursement claims skyrocketed to mathematically impossible figures. Sites reported meal counts exceeding the total population of the surrounding neighborhoods they claimed to serve. Money intended for impoverished households did not simply vanish. It flowed through nonprofit organizations, consulting firms, cultural groups, and funding entities. The same familiar names kept recurring as the cash circulated. As federal analysts connected multiple fraud clusters to overlapping networks of repeat immigration violators and previously law-enforcing subjects, the investigation shifted from quiet financial scrutiny to coordinated enforcement. Years of delayed arrest warrants and unexecuted deportation orders had exposed jurisdictional vulnerabilities. But as the evidence converged, ICE, the FBI, and DHS authorized a unified operation across the entire Minneapolis and St. Paul metropolitan area under the codename Operation Metro Surge. At dawn, unmarked convoys formed at multiple different locations, command vehicles connected to a single operational channel with the mission of ensuring precision, safety, and prevention. These were not random sweeps. Each target carried documented profiles and prior federal findings. By the time the first cordon was established, more than 100 federal personnel had been deployed. The most striking moment occurred near a large shopping complex, where surveillance teams moved in and 19 priority suspects were detained within minutes. All detention activities are logged and every case is documented in a file. Inside the vehicles and backpacks, investigators seized digital devices linked to the cluster communication network, forged identification records and duplicate sets of certificates, packages of cash connected to cryptocurrency transfer corridors. At several nearby locations outside the central shopping corridor, prohibited substances and numerous types of illegal weapons were sealed and entered into federal evidence. What began as a routine enforcement operation now appears to be a large-scale exposure. As support warrants were executed at secondary locations in Minneapolis, Brooklyn Park, Bloomington, and residential corridors stretching deep into the metropolitan belt, agents encountered signs of something much larger. Storage units with overlapping rental names, unofficial offices linked to shell entities, transaction ledgers mirroring entries from pandemic-era reimbursement records. By midday, the mission had expanded beyond the initial detentions. Analysts transmitted the cross-referenced data directly back to the operations center. Immigration histories were layered against financial anomalies, phone directories matched nonprofit vendor lists, travel records intersected with prohibited substance tracking reports. This network was no longer hiding behind the paperwork it was operating through. At 4:27 a.m., as Operation Metro Surge expanded into a statewide sweep, the first wave hit the industrial corridors. Federal convoys moved through the silent rows of warehouses and still dark container yards before sunrise. At a flagged warehouse complex, investigators secured a logistics wing where cargo manifests, duplicate invoicing ledgers, and encryption devices were recovered, along with more than $4,600,000 in cash reserves sealed inside company shipping crates. Nearby, a secondary storage bay revealed pallet records linked to federal routing hubs. At 6:58 a.m., as daylight spread across the city horizon, the sweep redirected to storefront businesses operating under layered registered names. Investigation teams secured rows of offices disguised as consulting firms, sublet co-working spaces, and private administrative units tied to shell-registered entities. Inside a high-rise building, federal analysts cataloged 312 hard drives, 147 ledgers, and more than 19,000 transaction entries matching money trails through welfare programs, funding networks, and contractor payments. In an adjacent room, investigators documented cryptocurrency transfer corridors connecting multiple nonprofit organizations through the same circle of financial beneficiaries. The arrests no longer resembled isolated cases, they were forming a map. By 9:41 a.m., the sweep had reached the northern logistics lines. Rows of container trucks lined up along the roadway as investigators secured flagged transport units and warehouse lots along the port corridor. Evidence logs recorded 2.8 tons of precursor chemicals for prohibited substances, international routing slips, and shipping records linked to overseas accounts already under federal surveillance. Nearby storage offices contained identification records, contract catalogs, and cross-linked communication chains tracing back to financial operators in the metropolitan area. Across Minnesota, the same pattern kept repeating. The same addresses, the same wire transfer orders, the same names. Operation Metro Surge no longer looked like a conventional law enforcement wave. It resembled the moment when a hidden infrastructure, built through companies, neighborhoods, supply lines, and paperwork systems, finally had to be dragged into the light. This campaign did not end the investigation. It expanded it. The arrests were never intended as the final destination. They were designed to reveal what existed behind them. As federal agents began processing the seized evidence from vehicles, residences, storage facilities, and communication hubs, a clearer picture emerged. It was not isolated individuals acting alone, but a coordinated structure operating across multiple fronts. Federal analysts assembled a comprehensive timeline using immigration histories, business records, nonprofit organization filings, financial transfers, and prior law enforcement notes. Patterns that once appeared scattered now aligned into corridors of movement, monetary corridors, and communication corridors. These connections did not form a simple hierarchical system. They operated like a network with small roles distributed among dozens of people, each person holding only a fragment of a much larger operation. It was not loud and not ostentatious. That was precisely why it had persisted for so long. Several entities flagged in financial sweeps were found again in social services audits and yet again in property records tied to short-term rentals and commercial subleases. A single address would appear as a meal program vendor, then the very same address would later appear as a consulting office. Many months afterward, it would resurface again in cryptocurrency transfer reports. To the untrained eye, these were mere coincidences, but to seasoned investigators, they were clear markers. The deeper the analysts dug, the stronger the overlaps became. Evidence logs recorded repeated cash flow activity between community nonprofit organizations and shell contractors. Do you believe a 3,500% increase in assets during a major fraud case is a coincidence, or has someone been exploiting the system? The lease agreements were tied to multiple unrelated business identities. Encrypted group conversations coordinated pickup schedules and travel routes. Accounts were logged into from the same devices across different organizations. This operation did not unfold like street crime, it moved like an administrative machine, silent, procedural, and disguised beneath layers of paperwork. In the post-campaign reports, field officers described how some participants lived outwardly normal public lives, attending community events, working in local programs, appearing as volunteers or coordinators, while parallel activities flowed through private channels behind the scenes. Federal prosecutors emphasized that not everyone in proximity to these circles was involved in criminal activity, but within that proximity, a core segment consistently intersected with high-risk profiles and financial anomalies. And it was precisely that intersection that shifted the direction of the case. With each new correlation, the investigation expanded far beyond immigration enforcement and individual fraud records. It transformed into what federal agencies classified as a multi-domain criminal network sweep, combining prohibited substance tracing, welfare program audits, identification document examination, and cross-border financial analysis. The deeper the agents looked, the more the question shifted. It was no longer about whether crimes had occurred, but about how extensively this network had learned to operate within how many systems, and how deeply it had embedded itself before anyone noticed. By the end of the fifth review cycle, investigators were no longer examining isolated cases. They were examining architecture. What had initially appeared as scattered violations now resembled a network that had learned how to live inside government systems. Each new audit produced the same troubling pattern. Different programs, different agencies, different years, but the financial signatures remained identical. Child care subsidies showed unexplained surges in reimbursements at locations reporting minimal participation. Medical payment streams reflected clusters of high-volume claims tied to providers with limited medical capacity. Emergency pandemic relief funds, dispersed faster than any allocation in state history, appeared in bank records alongside consulting fees, real estate purchases, and transfers routed through layers of registered business entities. Damage estimates rose from millions to hundreds of millions, and in broader projections, exceeded $1 billion across overlapping program chains. Analysts discovered that many flagged organizations followed a recurring life cycle. A nonprofit would emerge, register for services, secure eligibility for funding, and rapidly expand reported inputs. Within 1 to 2 years, operations would surge beyond sustainable levels, then quietly migrate to a new entity, often run by the same small circle of directors or associates. Lease records repeated, contact numbers repeated, wire transfer recipients repeated. Nothing was technically identical, but everything was structurally familiar. In the forensic accounting sweeps, investigators identified bridging transactions. Small transfers linked childcare service providers to cultural platforms, then to catering services and back again to consulting networks. No single payment stood as criminal evidence on its own, but when stitched together over time, the transactions formed corridors where public funds entered, multiplied, and vanished into layers of shell entities. For the prosecutors, that shifted the question once again. It was no longer about a single program being exploited, but about multiple programs being thoroughly understood and compromised. Community credibility, long regarded as a protective barrier, had in some cases become a shield. Entities framed as community access providers or community partners were positioned at the center of financial flows. Some maintained legitimate operations, while others blended illicit activities with concealed transfers and fabricated reporting just enough to pass surface-level audits. And behind those channels existed beneficiaries who never appeared on any paperwork. Parallel intelligence reports only complicated the picture further. Communication traces overlapped with subjects already linked to prohibited substance trafficking, offshore accounts, and immigration status violations. No single agency could tackle the network in isolation, so the investigations were consolidated into a unified enforcement matrix. The FBI tracked the money, ICE tracked the records, the DEA tracked the supply lines, DHS tracked the movement patterns, and the overlaps continued to multiply. What began as financial anomalies and pandemic aid irregularities has transformed into a national-level enforcement question. Larger charts, longer timelines, and case files that once sat in separate folders are now stacked together on the same table. FBI analyses present cross-program monetary trails. ICE investigators provide immigration and re-entry histories. DEA teams map logistics corridors and supply handoffs. DHS examiners track movement records and documents across state lines. Individually, no single system appears catastrophic, but together they reveal a structure that has learned how to operate within the gaps. A federal overseer described the gaps not as places where programs failed, but as the precise areas where the programs did not overlap with one another. And that is exactly where the network thrives and resides. In the latest consolidated financial sweeps, auditors identified high-value beneficiaries who never appeared as primary providers. These were entities positioned one or two layers removed from the direct flow of public funds. Corporate records revealed abrupt leadership changes, rotating boards of directors, and advisors who vanished from public listings without any explanation. Companies with minimally declared revenues reported multi-million-dollar asset value fluctuations, often within a single reporting cycle. It is extremely difficult to prove intent, but the timing cannot be ignored. The accumulation of overlaps with the same names, the same addresses, the same wire transfer orders, continuously orbiting the same financial trajectory. Who benefits when billions of dollars exit Minnesota's welfare system? To answer that, federal leadership authorized a consolidated review framework, merging criminal intelligence, financial, and administrative insights into a single synchronized enforcement pathway. The question was no longer simply how much money had been taken, but rather how much influence the network had gained in the process of taking it. In the final press briefing of Phase 6, agents summarized that this was not about a single arrest or a headline. It was about whether these threads led to coincidence or straight to the center of the system itself. The investigation had moved beyond searching for missing dollars and was now closing in on those who stood to profit the most from their disappearance. Operation Metro Surge was never solely about arrests or evidence files. It was about safeguarding trust in the system itself. Because when billions of dollars intended for children and struggling families are diverted into shadowy networks, the cost is not merely financial, it is measured in eroded stability and shattered public confidence. In Minnesota, that toll has rippled through neighborhoods, schools, and households that depend on those resources just to get by. The consequences of this network extend far beyond the numbers on spreadsheets. They manifest in underfunded classrooms while fraudulent reimbursements skyrocket in families left waiting for aid while others exploit the loopholes. But federal agencies did not look the other way when the systems came under threat. They united around a shared mission to protect national resources and to ensure that no individual or organization would be permitted to stand above the law. The FBI tracked the money, DHS monitored the movements, ICE traced the records, DEA followed the supply lines, and together they demonstrated the strength of coordinated law enforcement. This is not a story of collapse, it is a story of a nation's strategic response, a deliberate refusal to allow corruption to define its future. The deepest lesson from this case is the need for constant vigilance regarding transparency and accountability among those who hold power. When a community relief system is exploited for personal gain, the damage goes far beyond financial loss. It erodes public trust at its core. We have learned that rigorous oversight is never excessive, and every individual must maintain a multidimensional perspective when encountering unusual financial fluctuations. Only when transparency is placed at the forefront can the true values of fairness and equity be protected from the sophisticated networks of exploitation that hide behind the guise of serving the community. The investigation is still continuing to expand, and the biggest question remains: is this merely random financial coincidences, or are we witnessing the collapse of a system of trust? Billions of dollars have vanished, and what Operation Metro Surge has exposed may only be the tip of the iceberg. What do you think about this sudden asset growth and the real responsibility of those involved? Leave your opinions right below in the comments section so we can discuss together. Don't forget to hit like and subscribe to not miss the next shocking developments.